One of Trump world's favorite hobby horses as of late is the idea that President Trump deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, or what his press secretary calls the Nobel Peace Prize. And you know, maybe they're onto something. Because according to President Trump, he solved 6 wars since he returned to office. Well, it was 6 on Monday, and then on Tuesday it was 7. And anyone who ends a war in 24 hours maybe does deserve a Nobel Peace Prize, or at least a ticket to the pearly gates of heaven.
You know, I've solved 7 wars. We ended 7 wars. I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole.
But hold on. As of yesterday, it was, let me check my papers here, 10 wars.
I settled 7 wars, and actually, if you think about pre-wars, add 3 more, so it would be 10.
Okay, a lot of WTF moments here, because WTF is he talking about? And WTF is a pre-war. And please note that he was wearing a hat that says Trump was right about everything, which is altogether too many words for a cap. He also says he's, quote, averaging about a war a month, which is truly impressive. Bravo, Mr. President. I've always said that Donald Trump has got a knack for peacemaking and uniting the people. Earlier this month, the White House clarified which wars the so-called president of peace claims to have resolved. They are the conflicts between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, India and Pakistan, Israel and Iran, Cambodia and Thailand, Egypt and Ethiopia, and Serbia and Kosovo. Now, Donald Trump has intervened in several global conflicts this year. In some cases, he's been credited with calming tensions temporarily. In other cases, his role in the peacekeeping is kind of murky, and some of the wars he says are over are far from over. Let's start with Armenia and Azerbaijan. In the simplest of terms, they've been fighting over territory and tensions, and things have really heated up in the last few years. The leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan visited the White House on August 8th. They signed an agreement which reopens transportation routes and creates a major transit corridor that will be renamed Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. The acronym, if you say it, is TRIP, which is a really bad word for a road. Both leaders nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. But the border remains closed between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and there are upcoming negotiations between the two which could reignite the conflict. And the deal they signed is not a peace treaty. It's progress, but a war solved? Highly debatable. Spoiler alert for the rest of this list, by the way. It's about as close as we get to an actual solved war. Let's move to the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. Rwandan forces were providing military support to the M23 rebel group fighting the Congolese military. In June, Trump hosted 2 top diplomats from both nations to sign a peace agreement following negotiations that were aided by the government of Qatar. But this conflict is still very much ongoing. This week, the rebels walked away from peace talks. In July alone, Human Rights Watch estimates that the rebel forces killed 140 civilians after the peace agreement was signed. How about India and Pakistan? In May, the long-standing rivals saw 4 days of fighting in the disputed Kashmir region. Trump announced that the two countries had agreed to a U.S.-mediated truce. Pakistan then nominated Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, because doesn't everybody? India isn't giving the credit to Trump. And turning out to the Middle East and Israel's conflict with Iran in June, after 12 days of strikes between the countries and U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, Donald Trump announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Israel has paused its military campaign against Iran, but Iran's nuclear program remains an issue, mainly because Trump took the U.S. out of the 2015 nuclear deal, and talks between the U.S. and Iran over its nuclear program are stalled. This may be less war solved and more war put on pause. Let's go to Cambodia and Thailand. In July, dozens were killed and more than 300,000 were displaced when intense fighting broke out over a border dispute. At the time, Trump was discussing trade deals with dozens of countries, and he essentially threatened to stop trade talks with Cambodia and Thailand if they didn't stop fighting. It worked, I guess. Fighting has stopped between the two, but the underlying issues of the conflict have not been addressed at all. So perhaps another war on pause. From here, we get into conflicts that aren't wars by any definition, like the conflict between Egypt and Ethiopia. They're not engaged in an armed conflict. They're at diplomatic odds over Ethiopia's construction of a dam, which Egypt fears is going to affect the water that goes into the Nile River. Trump has said the U.S. will facilitate relations between the two countries to resolve the dispute. No war. But he also, for some reason, claimed that the U.S. paid for the Ethiopian dam. which Ethiopian officials have denied. So not really sure what's going on with that one. And finally, Serbia and Kosovo. Again, not an actual war. Serbia, of course, does not recognize Kosovo, instead claiming that it's part of Serbia. The two nations normalized economic relations in 2020 during the first Trump administration. Trump says his diplomatic efforts in 2020 have prevented an outbreak of violence. So maybe that's the pre-war that he's talking about. So yeah, 6 to 10 wars solved by one man in 7 months. Seems unlikely, but hey, we're dealing with Donald Trump here, so I've got no reason not to believe him. Joining me now is Anna Marie Cox, political columnist for the New Republic and host of Space the Nation podcast. Anna Marie, great to see you. You know, the worry here is not that it's ludicrous, and his claims are ludicrous, and his press secretary says them. It's that world leaders are figuring this out, right? They're figuring out the way you get anything done with Trump is he sort of talks to you for 8 minutes about something, and then you nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize, and you legitimize this nonsense.
That's exactly right. And I think we also need to emphasize here something you brought up, which is that none of this is about peace, right?
Right.
This is about either deal making or just
Yep.
hitting pause long enough to get a photo op to put in a gold frame to put in his ugly office. You know, he is not thinking about building relationships. He's not thinking about the world order. He's not thinking about growing the global village. He is thinking about his own interests, and he's jumping into conflicts he doesn't understand. And the confidence with which he does this is flabbergasting, I think. You've reviewed some of these things. Do you think he could name these countries on a map? Do you think if we pointed them out, he would pass that quiz? I mean, to be sure, like a lot of Americans wouldn't, but a lot of Americans aren't saying they deserve the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right, that's the distinction,
This
right?
isn't
You can come in and say,
it's
I'm a
not
president
diplomacy.
who's focused on domestic issues, and this isn't really my thing or whatever, but he's actually claiming it's his thing. In fact, a few weeks ago when he was with the head of the EU and a reporter asked him about this, you could see he was doing what he calls his weave, right? They asked him about Cambodia and Thailand. He didn't really have an answer. Then he talked about India and Pakistan. Then he talked about Congo and Rwanda. Then he talked about 7 million people being killed in Rwanda by machetes, which was 2 million, and it was the Rwanda genocide that ended in 1994 that had nothing to do with anything to do with Congo and Rwanda today that he's dealt with. So he doesn't know. That's the thing. There's no intimate relation. He couldn't name one leader who he had met with. Cambodia and Thailand, he talked about the two guys with whom we trade. I mean, it would be a joke if it weren't actually about lives and wars.
It is a joke. I mean, the line that I came up with that I was afraid to use almost is that he's auditioning for a Nobel Peace Prize, but it's more like the Gong Show, except it has terrible, terrible consequences and stakes, right? I mean, these are thousands, tens of thousands, millions of lives on the line in some cases, and whole regimes that don't deserve to be legitimized as well. I mean, the other through line through all of this is that he doesn't see these things in terms of negotiations with a compromise, but deals with a winner and a loser. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the strong deserve to win, and the weak just need to realize they're losing. That is how he views life. That is how he views domestic issues as well as those abroad. That's actually a really interesting through line to me, which may not be obvious to everyone, which is because at home he's all bellicose and saber rattling, and abroad he seems like he says he's trying to negotiate peace. But it is all around the strong deserve to win, the weak just need to stop fighting. He's not
Ukraine
ever really
is a great example,
peace.
right?
He's negotiating surrender.
Ukraine is a perfect example. He keeps saying, the last time that Zelensky was at the White House, he said, you don't have the cards. And then this last time after he met with Putin, he said to Ukraine, well, they're the bigger, more powerful country, so you're going to have to make a deal. But again, it's the word deal. It's the concept of I am a deal maker, not I understand the underlying issues here, and they're complicated, right? He kept on saying he was going to solve the Ukraine war on day one, and then it was many months in when he said, you know, this is kind of complicated.
Well, so he's marketed himself as a negotiator, right, because of his real estate background. What I find ironic there is that, I don't know, I've had real estate deals in my life. It is totally possible to walk away from a real estate deal and feel like but everyone to feel like they got what they wanted, right? Like a win-win is completely possible.
Yes.
Trump does not believe in win-wins. For him, winning means someone has to lose, right? if someone thinks it's a win-win, that means it's a lose-lose. Like, so for him, there's only win-lose or lose-lose. Does that make any sense? Like, someone has to be weak in every negotiation. If someone doesn't walk away feeling like they didn't get what they want, then it's not a win for him. So he's a terrible negotiator. I mean, all he's doing in these imagined diplomatic efforts, even, right? Like, it's not even he's actually doing it, is picking the loser, not even picking the winner. Like, he's trying to make the loser realize they've lost.
Yeah, it's a whole different kind of negotiation than we're used to. Kind of amazing that we even have to have the conversation, but he says it enough that I just wanted to let people know about these 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 wars, the 3 pre-wars.
Can I jump in one thing here?
Yeah.
Which is that I think this is important for Americans to pay attention to, because there are some important reminders and lessons that we'll see when these deals inevitably fall apart, which is authoritarianism is fragile, right? Oligarchy is fragile. History shows us this, that resistance is more resilient than tyranny. I don't know, you've seen my wallpaper. I love Star Wars, my favorite show, Andor. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks, it leaks. Authority is brittle. Oppression is the mask of fear. Trump has built his regime on that authoritarianism and that fear, and it is brittle. And I believe it will break. They always do.